Hello, wildlifers. Hope you're all doing fine. We members of Rotary Fellowship of Wildlifers for Conservation share a common interest, that is wildlife and its conservation, willing to work with the 120-year-old organization Rotary towards building a future in which people and nature thrive. To share a few notes about our fellowship group, we are a group of around 800 plus interested Rotarians, Rotractors, and individuals who have globally united around a common interest with the primary purpose to network and further friendship. Our purpose is to create awareness about importance of wildlife, to promote lasting friendships outside one's own club, district, and country, and to promote locally, regionally, and globally that conservation of living resources are important to humans and future generations to enjoy our natural world and the incredible species that live within it. Today, we have invited members of Rotary clubs and friends of Rotary from different parts of the world for this meeting. A hearty and a warm welcome to each one of you. On behalf of wildlifers, I also extend a very warm welcome to our speaker, my friend Sriram, who is a professional photographer, a photography mentor, and a naturalist. An engineer and MBA by organizations, found his passion in wildlife and photography. Starting his journey around Bengaluru, he has traveled to various places around the world, including Antarctica, Colombia, Argentina, Kenya, New Zealand, and Svalbard. He is a keen student of nature and conservation practices and works on creating visual stories that present different perspectives about the places he travels to. He mentors a photography organization enthusiasts through his company Data Photography. He has worked with organizations like TVS Motors to document wildlife and natural species within their campuses. In addition to publishing his stories across various platforms, he has also been part of a team that has described two new species of geckos from the dry regions of Karnataka. That apart, Sriram was also my batchmate when we did the naturalist training together in the year 2009. So I take pleasure in inviting Sriram and presenting him before you all. Over to you, Sriram. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Sanjay. It's an honor to kind of present to this group today. Uh, I understand it's a Saturday evening, so I'm going to hope that, I kind of like, show you a glimpse of Madagascar, show you what all is out there, and, hope you learn a little bit about the place as well at the end of this thing. So, yeah, so like as Sanjay had mentioned, I started my wildlife journey around 2009. That was a time when we did the naturalist training program. That was a time when I was into photography, but that was the time when I actually got a structure around my photography, around my wildlife and things like that. And I was very fortunate that at the beginning of my wildlife journey itself, I was able to explore a lot of different kinds of places around the country. And let me pull up the presentation anyways. Yeah, so it kind of like was a great learning because every place, every habitat, every how would I say, the way we interact with nature kind of completely changes. The way we use conservation practices completely changes. The way our impact on nature, the way nature kind of responds to that is very different from place to place, and that was something that I was really fortunate to kind of get a glimpse into and develop over a period of time. Uh, at the initial start of my wildlife journey as such, I was very uh, fortunate to kind of visit Andamans at one point of time. This was probably, I think, 2011 was the first trip that I made to Andamans. And when I went there, I knew that they were like endemic birds and stuff, but I probably didn't understand much about why there was so much endemism in the place. And when I went there, I looked at more than birds. I looked at the reptiles, I looked at the curious absence of mammals, and I started reading up about island ecosystems and how they are very different from continental ecosystems and stuff. One of the things I, of course, realized that, being, confined environments and stuff, depending on the availability of resources, depending on, how other animals could get there and speciate, the diversity varies, the kind of animals that you get there varies and stuff. So, like I remember in the NTP, we saw a video on Life of Birds, I think by David Attenborough, and he starts off the video with New Zealand. New Zealand is a very curious island that way, where it's only birds that have ever colonized the place. There was no mammals that have ever been there, except for maybe a couple of bats. So that kind of got me. So this whole thing kind of got me thinking and very interested in island ecosystems. Over the years, I've actually been very fascinated and very fortunate in that sense to kind of visit a whole lot of places around the world, right? Places including the island of Papua New Guinea. This was the Indonesian side of the island, and it was just superb to watch these birds of paradise, superb to watch rainforests as they should have been. As in, a lot of these forests, like just walking through them itself was, quite a trial. And just slipping and falling everywhere, a lot of mud everywhere, a lot of slush everywhere. uh, it was really something to experience. And the kind of trees, the primary rainforests, the tall trees around the place, it was really interesting to visit a place like this. And then, of course, the island or the island nation that's probably very close to India, which is Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka again has a variety of habitats, from the mountains, which are probably like an extension of the Western Ghats and stuff. And it was interesting to see how the frogs there had actually, for example, diversified into so many different species as such. But then again, the same story kind of repeats. A small place where development versus nature kind of has that tussle. And literally every other frog was on the IUCN list somewhere or the other. Uh, this was a very different story again. Borneo, this was the southern part of Borneo, which is again the Indonesian part of Borneo. Flying into this island was literally a heartbreak, because you see literally nothing but plantations. You don't see forests at all as you kind of get, as the flight lands onto the island. But then there are small pockets where restoration is starting to happen. Wildlife is being reintroduced. So this was a place called Tanjung Puting National Park, where native trees are being fostered. Orangutans are being brought back from different places, from trade, from circuses, from zoos, to kind of repopulate the area. So it's an interesting conservation thing again, in action in this place. Uh, Java is again part of. So I really love the Indonesian islands because there is so many of them. It's the country with the maximum number of islands and the maximum number of endemic island endemics, around the world. I think it's also got the maximum number of endemic birds as such. And this is the pink-headed fruit dove from East Java. Beautiful, beautiful land, completely full of volcanoes and beautiful forests. It has its own challenges, of course. Apart from the regular ones of development and stuff. People love to keep birds not just in their forests but in their homes. So a lot of these birds go into cages, back into their homes, and right there. So it was again very interesting to watch these forests as well. This is not technically an island. It is the continent at the southernmost part of our island, of our planet. But it kind of resembles it in a certain way, because it's so harsh. There are only certain pockets where life can thrive. So you have multiple different pockets around the island, where around the continent, where life can thrive, and that's all there is. And we are seeing the impact of, and here the impact of something really far away from the continent. We are seeing the impact of global warming. For example, these cute little things called the gentoo penguins. were apparently not all that common on Antarctica maybe about 50 years back. But they are being reported more and more further south as the planet keeps warming. So there are so many uh, different things for islands and stuff in terms of natural history as well as in terms of conservation challenges, and these have been really exciting. And this place has been on my mind for a very long time. Apparently called Madagascar by the locals. The source of this name is probably still a mystery. People think it came from the Arabs when they started, trading from the island and with the island. Uh, but this was always on my list for a few reasons. One is, of course, lemurs. You don't get lemurs anywhere else on the planet, and I really wanted to go out and watch them. And of course, it is also one of the world's largest islands, which means that, the number of species, the speciation that has happened is really tremendous. And wanted to also explore to see why that has happened and, to get a first-hand impression of things there. And I was really lucky to visit this place finally a couple of months back in April. Um, so a lot of the stuff that I'll be talking about today are from my research before and after the trips, of course, and also through whatever I observed during my time there, where we kind of traveled across the island and stuff. So I've kind of broken this presentation down into three parts. One is a quick introduction to the island itself. What is Madagascar? How big is it? What are the different kinds of habitats that you get there? What are the places that we visited? Kind of stuff. The second part, which is probably the larger part of the presentation, is to do with the endemism there and why that explosion and how much explosion is out there of endemic wildlife. And the third one is a little bit somber, which is about the conservation and the extinctions and stuff like that. So that's how I've structured this presentation. Uh, so let me get started. So where is Madagascar? Madagascar, of course, is down there right next to Africa, to the continent of Africa. There is that stretch of the ocean that separates it from Africa. The stretch is actually quite large for animals to have crossed over, right? So that's why we have very few land mammals that have probably ever existed, or very few groups of land mammals, I would say, that have existed on Madagascar, for the simple reason that it's very tough to cross such a broad swath of ocean between the continent and Madagascar. The interesting part about Madagascar is that it's a massive island. It's apparently the fourth largest island. It's the second largest island country, and it's in terms of the size, it actually looks tiny on the map, but it's actually the 46th largest country in the world with an area that is probably slightly smaller than all the five South Indian states combined. It's about 600,000 square kilometers. It's actually quite a large area that the island covers. And there are two maps here. The one on the left kind of talks about the kind of forests that you see on the island. So if you actually see, the eastern coast of Madagascar has these very lush green rainforests all around, all over. And as we go west, it actually becomes drier and drier till we get to the coast where there's again a little bit of forest areas around. And if you look at the elevations on the right side, the highest points on the island are probably somewhere in the middle of the island, and from the north to the south. The eastern part is again highlands and stuff, so there is a certain amount of elevation, but it's not as much as you get in the central plateau. And as you kind of go towards the west, your elevation kind of gradually kind of comes down at the coast, right? So this kind of creates a lot of habitats within the country itself for animals to thrive. Habitats that are based on the land cover as well as the elevation. So there's a mix of that already. Plus, there are a lot of gaps, which are not easily visible in a map that is this condensed, but there are a lot of biogeographic gaps in Madagascar where animals cannot probably cross over from one place to the other for multiple reasons. It could be a gap in the mountains, or a large water body. It could be multiple things that are out there. So once an animal goes there, over a million years or so, it would kind of adapt to the new environment and probably become a completely different animal as such. So that's why there is a whole lot of number of species that you get across the island of Madagascar. And does this look familiar? As in, this is a map of South India, right? And if I just go back to the Madagascar map, just for again, look at the map on the left, right? The one where we're starting off with the rainforests on the west, on the east, and moving onto a plateau and then towards the coast on the west. The map of South India reflects it almost identically. It's almost like a mirror image of the map of Madagascar, right? The west coast has the Western Ghats. Of course, they are probably slightly higher in elevation compared to the eastern mountains. But you have the Western Ghats on the western coast of India, then you have the plateau rising up, and then you kind of go down to the coast. So there are a lot of similarities in the topography overall if you look at the island versus looking at South India as such, right? And there's actually a much deeper connection that Madagascar actually has with India, right? This is actually how the place originated. And when we're talking about 170 million years ago, when I think it was called Gondwana land, you had South America and Africa, Madagascar, India, Antarctica, and Australia all fused together as the southern continent as such, right? And when we actually kind of go across the time scales, you see that at around 162 million years, South America and Africa are splitting away. At around 135 million years, Antarctica and Australia are splitting away from Madagascar and India. Around 100 million years, you have South America splitting away from Africa as such. And around 88 million years, the break happens. Madagascar kind of breaks away from India as India moves towards Asia. So India starts this massive rush towards the Asian plate. And Madagascar kind of moves along with Africa. It almost stays in that same position, compared to Africa for the last 88 billion years or so. So that's how the split happened. And a lot of this is actually also corroborated by the flora and the fauna there. A lot of trees that we have in South India versus Madagascar belong to the same genus. There are frogs, for example. We have something called the purple frog, Nasica batrachus, that we get in Kerala. And Nasica batrachus' closest relatives are found in seashells, which is part of that chain of seashells. I think broke off from Madagascar at some point of time again in history. So there is a lot of commonality between both these lands because of that reason. So even where we have the Palghat Gap, where Coimbatore sits today, there is a corresponding gap in Madagascar as well, along approximately the same area, kind of a thing. So there is considerable evidence to say that at some point of time, both these land masses were connected and they've kind of split off to form their own countries or continents and stuff. So this was the trip that we did in April. It was quite a long trip. So we actually covered a large part of Madagascar because we wanted to experience different landscapes, different elevations and stuff. So the first part of our trip was focused on the eastern rainforests of Madagascar. So we went to this place called Andasibe and Ranomafana, which is further south. And then we kind of cut across the country and drove to a place called Isalo, which is somewhere out there, and then to Tuliar, which is on the coast. So the idea was to kind of explore uh, different ecosystems at the same time get an idea of how the country is. As in, it's a very different thing to read about the country. It's a very different thing to kind of actually experience it and see what is out there and things like that. So we wanted to kind of do that entire road trip. This was over a period of almost 2 weeks that we did this trip. And yeah, so this was how we kind of saw the eastern rainforest. And the rainforests are like really, really wherever, whatever is intact, the rainforests are like as primary as they can be. Some beautiful streams and stuff along the way. This was the heartbreaking part. So the moment we kind of drive into central highlands from the rainforest, suddenly there is nothing. There is like literally nothing, as in it's just barren, barren, barren all over the place. The mountainsides are barren. If you see greenery somewhere, a lot of times it would just be plantations of eucalyptus, um, or other introduced species as such. And that kind of kept repeating. So wherever we kind of got onto, out of the mountains onto the Central Highlands, the scene would kind of repeat itself. Then we kind of reached this place called Isalo. Isalo is probably the most visited place in Madagascar. And Isalo has these spectacular sandstone formations and a lot of forests interspersed in between and stuff. So it's got a whole lot of, again, endemic wildlife. It's a protected place, so you see a lot of stuff there, including, I think it's called a pachypodium. A lot of endemic plants, a lot of fauna, which is again part of this dry deciduous, dry ecosystems. And then on the west coast, we kind of came across these spiny forests, a lot of baobabs, uh, and trees which are kind of part of that ecosystem as such. Really spectacular place again. A lot of dry, thorny kind of thing. So you walk through something, you got to kind of keep pulling out thorns and stuff. But it's again got its own endemic wildlife and stuff. And I'll talk about that as we kind of go along into the wildlife part of it. So that's basically how the country as such is organized. And it's incredible given, again, this is something I just can't get over. So if I'm repeating myself, I'm really sorry, but it's just incredible in terms of how the diversity is wherever areas are protected as such. And this is just a glimpse into the various different things that we kind of saw there. And I'll talk about that as we go along. So island endemism and diversity. Uh, so Madagascar is one of the world's biggest biodiversity hotspots. It's estimated that about 90% of the plant species and 85% of the animal species are endemic to the island. Why is that? Primarily because of two reasons. One is, of course, millions of years of isolation. And it's also a big island. It's got a lot of niches, like I talked about, ecological niches where animals can kind of adapt and specialize in a particular niche. So there's a high degree of endemism. There's also a high degree of adaptive radiation. Adaptive radiation is just like that. Like an animal reaches there are 20 different niches. There are 20 different species that potentially could form over a period of time. That is what is called adaptive. So they are adapting to a specific habitat and they're radiating as species. So they're creating multiple species from the same one. Of course, as in this has been a dream for me for a very long time, and watching lemurs in their natural habitats was just amazing. As in, uh, there are about 110 species, between 107 and 112 is what different authorities kind of claim, of lemurs, belonging to 8 families and 15 genera. These range in size from the really tiny mouse lemurs. In fact, we actually saw one in the day, and it was actually like really, really tiny, just like a mouse, to the langur-sized indri. Indris are quite large and they can get to about 9 kgs, and their calls just reverberate through the forest. If you've been to any of the places where you have gibbons or hulock gibbons and stuff, this is very reminiscent of that. You just hear the whole forest reverberating with the indri calls. Uh, Lemurs are found across most forested habitats in Madagascar. As the forests disappear, species are also kind of in danger of disappearing. But they've kind of adapted to a large number of forested areas or around the island. I'll just go through, some of the lemurs that we kind of came across. We saw about 20 species of lemurs on this expedition. And on top, so each slide has 3 parts, one or 4 parts. So one is, of course, a photograph. One is the name of the animal, along with the scientific name. There's also the family. So we saw, I think, 4 families of lemurs. And on top is the IUCN conservation status of the animals as such. And we'll kind of correlate this at the end again when we talk about conservation. So this is the Indri. Of course, Indri is the largest of the lemurs, found in a very, very tiny pocket now in the eastern rainforest. We saw this in this place called Andasibe. We were lucky enough to actually kind of see it multiple times. Massive animal again. It's like about the size of a langur. Uh, we saw like groups of, I think, 3 or 4 of them like resting on the trees one day, and then once they were like all jumping around and stuff. It's amazing how an animal that big just hops from tree to tree to tree. It is It's phenomenal to watch up close. An animal that's about the same size as as an indri, it's also kind of considered one of the largest lemurs, is the diadem sifaka. We again found it around the same area in Andasi Bay where we saw the indri. Uh, it's a different genus, but the same family as the indri. Again, a very small distribution as such and a declining population. This is an animal we saw much further south. It's in a place called Ramafana. This is called the Milne Edward sifaka. Uh, we kind of saw them towards the end of the day, so they were probably just retiring. They were kind of eating, and then they just kind of took off and went probably to roost. But this is again an animal that's slightly smaller than an indri, very, very pretty looking, as you can see. Uh, this is called the dancing sifaka, the Feroz sifaka. If you've seen those videos of all those sifakas like running around on two legs, hopping around like dancers, this is the one that is there. We, of course, were not fortunate enough to see that this time, but hopefully sometime again. Uh, Very, very interesting, very curious as well. You can see the eyes there. King Julian, I think, from the movies, Ring-tailed Lemur. This was again like we saw big groups of them. We saw a lot of them like, communicating with each other, grooming each other and stuff. So one of the things that we kind of learned about the lemurs, and I was actually quite, how would I say, curious to understand what is a lemur and how does it differ from the other monkeys as such or other primates as such. Like, it's very easy to, or there are certain characteristics, say, that kind of define a macaque versus uh, a langur versus, an ape like a gibbon and stuff like that. But I was very curious as to what is a lemur, because each lemur, like we've seen like one family that if as we kind of go along, you'll see that they've adapted to become or look like different animals as such, or occupy different niches as such. So, and with 110 species, and there's also a lemur called the II. I don't know if you've heard of that, but the II is a very, very peculiar lemur. It's got these big eyes, very ruffled kind of a look, big ears, and it's got this one finger which is supposed to be really big, which is it kind of behaves like a woodpecker. It goes, taps on wood. If there's any grub, it uses its finger, pulls it out, and then feeds on it. And it's a nocturnal animal at that. So I was kind of very curious, what is a lemur versus other? And I don't know, I'm still searching for that answer. But what I kind of found out is one, they are part of a super order of something called wet-nosed primates, which also includes, I think, some of the tarsiers and some of the smaller primates that we get in Southeast Asia and stuff. And they're found on Madagascar exclusively. Beyond that, there are certain characteristics. Apparently, they're not as well. Their hand-eye coordination is not as good as is with the other primates as such. So there are certain characteristics, but beyond that, there is nothing that actually says this is a lemur versus other primates. So I think the safest way is one, they're found on Madagascar, and yeah, they belong to this particular super family and stuff, super order also. This we kind of came across at multiple big groups of common brown lemur, really tiny ones, really confiding. Uh, a whole bunch of them are actually they're actually not very scared of people, because people again probably came in fairly late in their evolution, and not a lot of them are like, and especially when you walk in a forest and stuff where they've probably been protected forever, they really don't mind human presence as such. This is a red-bellied lemur. This was just sleeping during the day. One of the most entertaining lemurs, a black and white ruffed lemur. We saw these guys hanging around. There were a couple of them that were just playing, most of the time in this upward down position. Really fun. Then we have the bamboo lemurs. The bamboo lemurs are a very interesting group because they all feed on bamboo. And if you can actually see up there, it actually says that a lot of them are able to ingest a considerable dose of cyanide, which is considered to be lethal for most other species. We still don't know how that happens, but most bamboo lemurs eat a lot of cyanide through the bamboo that they eat, and they're able to kind of live with that. So that's quite interesting. And this is again a very special species because the golden bamboo lemur was had disappeared everywhere, and it was rediscovered in this place called Ranamafana. So the park was actually created to protect this species, which kind of gives a lot of hope to conservation in Madagascar as such. Greater bamboo lemur, it's a critically endangered species, fewer than 500 known to exist. And apparently, we saw this in Ranamafana, and what we were told was this was the last individual in its range. So this was just one lonely female. I think she was just sitting there. She was feeding on bamboo, and that was it. Apparently, she doesn't have any other member of the species in that area. This is a really tiny one. The eastern lesser bamboo lemur, about that size, and really like cute. As in, it would just uh, come out there, sit there, and yeah, it was just fun to watch. Yeah, but again, apparently the Hapa lemur, which is the bamboo lemurs, have much more manual dexterity and hand-eye coordination compared to the other lemurs as such. Something I kind of read. And these are like the tiniest. The Goodman's mouse lemur, really tiny, and they're nocturnal. You kind of keep torching around looking for stuff at night, and suddenly you see these two pairs, this pair of eye kind of staring back and stuff. And really tiny animals just scurrying through. And the way they kind of jump from tree to tree is just spectacular. As in, it's something that is real fun to watch. That one was in the wet zone, and this is one of the lemurs from the dry zone. The gray mouse lemur is something we found in the dry zone on the coast near Rifati. So while some genera probably have evolved for certain habitats, some genera have also kind of diversified across habitats. Like mouse lemur, you find literally different species in different habitats across the country. So it's quite interesting to see how they've actually split up into different species. Then you have the sportive lemurs. Sportive lemurs, I think, are again nocturnal. And you see them like, how you see scops owls sitting inside burrows on the tree. That's how you actually see them, sitting inside these burrows. And the moment they get disturbed, they just go out, go inside, and again slowly kind of pop their head out. So it's quite fun to watch them. And we saw this, both of these were in the dry zone again. We saw the Peters sportive lemur again on the last night of the trip as such. Oh, what is a hedgehog doing here? Right. So, okay, so clarification, there are no hedgehogs in Madagascar. So what is this? So this is an animal that is called the hedgehog tenrec, or the lesser hedgehog tenrec. Tenrecs, again, have nothing to do with hedgehog. We don't know the common ancestor of the tenrec, but there's an animal that came from Africa at some point of time and split up into multiple species. So there are tenrecs that look like shrews. There are tenrecs that look like slightly bigger animals with longer snouts and stuff. And there are tenrecs that look like these. They look exactly like how I would, describe a hedgehog from, the deserts of India. And their behavior is very similar. The one animal that I saw kind of seemed to be running just along the trees and stuff, which was how I would expect a hedgehog to kind of run. So this is an example of something called convergent evolution. Convergent evolution is where you have two animals that look alike, behave alike, have adapted to the same niche, but don't have a common ancestor. They've kind of come from different ancestors, but they've kind of adapted, evolved over millions of years to kind of, you know, find a particular niche, which is probably very similar to an animal that has adapted, evolved from a completely different ancestor in a completely different land. So this was one of the phenomenal things that we kind of saw in Madagascar, where that niche was completely taken, and it has also kind of gone to the extent of growing those spiky hairs on the back to kind of prevent predators from attacking it and stuff. That was quite cool to watch it. And there are about 32 species of tenrecs across 8 genera. And of course, there are a few carnivores. Again, the one on the right is not a mongoose. It is called a Malagasy mongoose, but again, they have again evolved from a common ancestor to fulfill niches. So you have an animal called the fossa as well in Madagascar. The fossa resembles a large cat mongoose hybrid kind of a thing. That's probably the best way I can put it. It's a large animal. It apparently hunts lemurs and stuff. It's one of the members of the family Eupleridae, where there are about 10 species that are right now there. And The only member of the genus called Fossa actually looks like one of the civets that we get in India or in Africa and stuff. So it's very interesting. Again, there's a lot of convergent evolution that has happened with the Malagasy carnivorans. It is suspected that probably their ancestors might have had something in common with mongooses because they have their DNA is closest to the mongooses and stuff, but we still don't know exactly where they came from. Malagasy rodents, again, there's a subfamily with 9 genera and 27 species. There's a big debate about whether they have a common ancestor or they've come in through multiple waves of introduction from the mainland. But they've again diversified into to resemble gerbils, rats, mice, voles, and even rabbits. I think the largest one grows to about a foot long, right? So it's a massive, massive giant rat that you get in, in Madagascar. Now, one of the questions that's always also comes up is how did these animals even get there, right? Like these are land animals. These are, even if an ancestor has to kind of come by, it has to cross those, I don't know, I think it's 200 or 400 miles of ocean between African mainland and Madagascar. And that's one of the questions that has been asked by scientists over the years and stuff. And I think the most commonly accepted theory is that they've all rafted. So, there would have been these massive vegetation that would have kind of got together and stuff. And a lot of animals would have probably, there would be that one or two stray animals that would have got stranded on that vegetation, which would have just drifted away and reached Madagascar. And that there's just an open land over there. All it takes is two animals to kind of start, building that species. And over a period of time, that initial population, it could be a very tiny population, but that initial population diversified into multiple species and stuff. That's the best explanation that we have right now in terms of, it's called something called rafting, where animals kind of move from mainland into the smaller things. Of course, the other big group of animals is, of course, the reptiles of Madagascar. We were also very focused on the reptiles as such. We had an evolutionary biologist who's also a herpetologist on this expedition. So we were like really looking out for them. And one of the most stunning animals out there in terms of both diversity as well as just to look at them is chameleons. Right? About half of the world's species of chameleons are found on Madagascar. There's about 200 plus species in the world, about 100 of them are found there. And there are four genera that are endemic to Madagascar. Two of them are right here. There's Kaluma on the left side and Furcifer on the right side. So Parsons chameleon is the one on the left side of the screen, and Austerlitz is on the right side. And both of these can grow really large. Like Austerlitz chameleon, from the bus we unfortunately couldn't stop in that stretch, but from the bus that we were traveling in, we saw one chameleon in the agricultural fields, which I kind of thought was like a small monitor lizard or something. It was huge. It was like really massive. And we saw a dead one, of course, in our property, but we unfortunately we couldn't get to see that 2 feet long chameleon, but they get quite large. Parsons, the one we saw, was really big as well. It apparently can weigh up to 700 grams, a fully grown one. And they also have the smallest of the chameleons. Right? There are two genera, Brucacia and Palion. Both of them used to be considered the same earlier. But these are really tiny ones. Like both the ones that you see on screen are probably about 2 inches long or 2.5 inches long. They're you can see the size of the leaves next to them, and you can actually realize how big they are. Really tiny animals. The smallest of them, which was described, I think, about 4 or 5 years ago, is something called Brucacia nana. And this can actually perch on the head of a matchstick. It's only about half an inch, it's a couple of centimeters long from head to tail. And I'm really hoping to see that one day. But that's like really, really like tiny. And these guys are tough, as in, I don't know how our guide spotted the one on the left because it was in the day, it was moving amidst the leaf litter. You can see the camouflage, as in, it's stunning. The one on the right, of course, was at night. We were able to see it on the tree. But it's just phenomenal watching the variety. And just look at those, and there's a lot of dimorphism again. We would see chameleons, and this was, I think, one night in Ranamafana where it was like a chameleon gallery. We walked for half an hour, we must have seen some 15, 20 individuals, maybe more, and different species, right? And this is something called the O'Shaughnessy's chameleon. The male is on the right side, the female is on the left side. And this is a blue-legged chameleon, stunningly colorful. And this was also I wish I had the photograph from the other side. I somehow didn't take it, but the one on the right is, of course, the male. And we had taken a photo. We had first initially seen it on the other side, and it was largely pale. It was white in color. Uh, I think there is something on the screen. Oh, okay. Yeah. So it was largely pale. And then but I just kind of came over to the other side to see how it was. And it was this stunning blues, greens, reds. I don't know what all colors are out there. It looks almost like a painting palette. And like they're so different. And the males, there's a lot of dimorphism again, not just in terms of color, but a lot of chameleons. The males also have these nasal appendages, which are much larger and more pronounced than the females do. I think there's some annotation on the screen. How do I remove that? Oh,
I'm sorry, I'm trying to figure whose this is.
I believe somebody would be with their child who's doing this. Hi, could you please?
Nahush Sunku.
But I'm
Not me.
is there a way to remove it?
I think the only way is to probably reshare your screen, but I'm not able to see the person in the participants.
It's gone. It's gone on my screen now.
Yeah, it's gone now. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gone now.
Yeah, I just cleared it. So cool. So I hope I'm not overshooting on time too much. Okay. It's about 45 minutes. Okay. Yeah. So a lot of cryptid chameleons are again being resolved. Like a lot of them look very similar to each other. And both of these are actually different species. They were sitting right next to each other, like about 10 feet away, kind of a thing. And took photographs and stuff and had a look at them. And they're different species. It's very tough to tell them apart. But if you look at the back on both of them, the one on the left doesn't, the one on the right rather, has these tiny little tubercles kind of thing that are coming out of the ridge of the back. The one on the left doesn't have them. It's got a smooth ridge. So that's apparently that's the easiest way to tell them apart. But it's been also proved DNA wise and stuff. The left one is called Kaluma nasutum, and the right one is called Kaluma phalanx. So a lot of the second, so that 100 odd species that we're talking about could be as high as 150 or maybe more, because a lot of these smaller ones are so cryptic that we really don't know if they're all the same species and stuff. So a lot of work is again going on these animals. And this was another group of super colorful lizards, which was again very nice to watch. These are called the Phelsuma day geckos. You have these absolutely green geckos. A lot of them are green in color. Some of them also tend to be more grayish and bluish, especially from the dry regions. The two animals on the left are from the wet regions, and the one on the right is from the dry regions. The rightmost one is something called Phelsuma standingi. It's almost a foot long. It's a big lizard, right? And it's really fun to watch that patterns, the scales, and just the size. Really interesting to look at. Around 70 species of Phelsuma are described, almost all of which are from Madagascar and neighboring Indian Ocean. So most of them are found Madagascar, Seychelles, and the islands around that. And it's also introduced to various places, including Hawaii, Florida, possibly the east coast of Africa. East coast of Africa has one species which is also found on the west coast of Madagascar. So there is a theory that it's possibly been introduced there by humans over a long time back. Now, the mystery of Phelsuma, of course, is this guy. Right, far, far away from Madagascar, there is just this one species, and this fellow is found in India. It's called the Andaman day gecko or Phelsuma andamanensis. It is found only there. It's found from the north island of Andaman all the way down to Little Andamans, right? And this is like from that tiny little map that you see, you can actually see the distance. It's almost like 1/4 of the way around the world from Madagascar as such. It's still a mystery how it got here, but it is from the DNA thing again, it's believed to be the first one to have split off from the rest of the Felsumas. So this is one of the first from the original species. This is one of the first species that split off and formed its own, and the rest of them kind of moved on, and they have a common ancestor also. So this is a very interesting case as such. And Andaman gecko again, as it's kind of known that there are two different populations. Are they different species or not is still something that is not yet resolved. But there are two populations in the north and the south, and this is actually again fairly common in the Andaman Islands. So that's again one more similarity, but we don't know why there is a similarity between Andaman and India as such. I mean Madagascar and India. Okay, can you spot the animal in this frame? I'd like to see some hands raised or something if you found it, or I don't know how to. Awesome. Two people have raised hands so far. Three people have raised their hands. Okay, I'm going to keep it on screen for another 30 seconds. It's in plain sight, if that's a clue. No, Ashwini. I think you've drawn those red lines. No, it's not there. Okay, another 15 seconds. Oh, excellent. Okay. Okay, there it is. Somebody's drawn it on the screen and given it away. Okay. So yeah, that's where it is. That's the what is known as the satanic leaf-tailed gecko. It is one of the most iconic animals of Madagascar. Uh, Brilliant, brilliant looking. There it is on the right side of the screen. And it is a small gecko. It is not a very large animal. So it's almost so when we were actually looking for this, we were told that you will get it in this part of the park. Literally, we were looking at every dry leaf that was out there to kind of try and find this. We couldn't spot one. But I'm sure that you must have walked past maybe 10 or 15 of them. They're just hiding in plain sight. Beautiful animals. And that's the other genus of geckos that is completely endemic to Madagascar, called the Europlatus or the leaf-tailed gecko. So you have something called the mossy leaf-tailed gecko, the one on the left side. You can see how the scales look like moss, right? It hasn't put anything on, it's not put any makeup, it's not put anything. Those are the scales on the gecko. Okay? And on the right is the satanic leaf-tailed gecko out in the open. This guy was crossing over somewhere probably. And that's where it is out in the open. That's how it actually looks. But that camouflage is something else, as in it's impossible to kind of like even this one. And even the one on the left, the mossy leaf-tailed gecko, is typically sitting like that. How many of you got? She's slightly easier than that, I think. Yeah, good. Okay. Yeah, there it is. Yeah, this one was not in the greatest of places as they usually sit, but that's how it is. As in, it's you can walk past these and you won't even know that it was there, right? So, uh, that's like this, that's what makes herping like really fun in a place like Madagascar. So there's about, oops, yeah, there's about 22 species that have been described so far, and given how camouflaged they are and how similar they look to each other, there's still more species that are probably out there which are being described as such. So I'm sure the number would be much higher a few years down the line. I think the last one that was described was 2023. So I'm sure a lot more coming on along the way. And superb camouflage. And this is again like one of those superb geckos. I didn't even know something like this existed. So this is called the fish scale gecko. And there have been reports. So this is a gecko that loses its scales when a predator grasps it. So you try to catch this gecko, you'll be left with scales in your hand because it drops its scales, it drops its skin when a predator tries to hold it. Uh, so apparently there are records of people having observed like a snake has gone to catch it. The gecko's run away. The snake is left with just the scales and the skin it's in its mouth. It's like, it's just that this thing has just slid out and gone away. So it's an amazing adaptation that these geckos, again, endemic to Madagascar, just 5 species described so far. A few more genera of geckos. This is called the clawless geckos, very similar to something called the, what do you call, hemiphilodactylus that you get in India. About 6 species found in Madagascar, Comoros, Tanzania. Apparently, despite their name, the females do have claws. And these are dwarf geckos. Dwarf geckos are very similar to, we get these day geckos in India. They're very similar to that. And about 82 species described so far. They're found all over Madagascar, Africa, apparently even 2 species in South America. I'd want to kind of go and do a little bit more reading into how they reach there and stuff, but very interesting again. You see them all across the place. They'll be, on tree bark most of the time. And coming on to something that's very closely related to lizards, which is snakes, right? And these were very interesting snakes that we saw in the dry zones called the hognose snakes. They have that tiny little scale projections on top of their noses. The one on the right was probably the largest snake that we saw on the trip. It was probably about 6 feet long, really big snake. The one on the left was just outside our room. We just gone out to have a coffee and it was basking over there right in front of us. So it was amazing to find that one. We are very lucky with snakes. I think we saw at least about 11 species of them on this trip. Like the cat-eyed snakes, really good looking ones again. This species, I think, was again described, I think, in the last 3-4 years itself. Then we saw a couple of water snakes. They look very similar in some sense to our buff-striped keelback in this one, but the one on the left is from the wet zone. The one on the right is from the dry zone. So again, they've kind of occupied different niches in the island. This is a big-headed snake, very similar to the cat snakes that we get in forests. Big-headed snake, we found this again in Ranamafana, as the name suggests. It's a rainforest species. We saw 3 individuals in like, I think, 10 meters of walk, which was again quite fascinating. Yeah, it's got that beautiful blue eye-ring. It's unfortunately not visible very clearly here, but it's got that very nice light blue eye-ring on it. So about snakes of Madagascar, so this is called the Perinet night snake, I think. Massive, like again about 5 feet long, but the beautiful looking snake. Starts off at golden, ends in like deep wine red. So it's got that beautiful gradation from yellowish gold all the way to orange into red. It's just one snake. And all these snakes that I showed you are all part of the same family. They've all adapted to different habitats, different ways. They're all the same family called Pseudoxerophidae. And they all have a common ancestor. They are genetically very similar to each other, but they've all adapted to kind of take over different niches in Madagascar as such. Like this one we found very close to water in the bushes. The hognoses were on the ground. The big-headed snake, I'm guessing, is a tree snake. The water snakes, I'm guessing, are found close to water on the ground again. So it's very interesting, like, 90 different species having radiated from probably the same common ancestor. The other endemic family of snakes is something called Xenotyphlophidae. It is a blind snake family. There's only 2 described species. Blind snakes are, of course, like super tough to come across in the wild as such. Uh, there are some families which are also common with the mainland, and you get a couple of species of boas. They're called the genus is different. It's called Sanzinia, but they're part of the boa family. And you get a sand snake. It is again part of the Samophidae. Samophidae are well represented across Africa and into India as well. We get psammophits even in the south of India. So it's kind of quite a widespread species in the dry regions. And I think in Madagascar has two species. One of them was recently described, but one of them which is quite widespread across the island. And the good part about Madagascar is you don't have to worry about being bitten by snakes because most of them are non-venomous. And even if they are venomous, they don't bite. So you're fairly well covered. There's no need for anti-venom and all that stuff. You got to kind of watch out for, things like physical safety in terms of falling and stuff like that if there's any tough trail, but that's all about it. You don't have to worry about snakes and or big animals attacking, big mammals attacking you and all that stuff. It's kind of fairly safe from that perspective. Of course, coming to birds, there are about 109 species of birds that are endemic to Madagascar. This is probably the smallest ratio of all the other animals on the island which are endemic. And with good reasons, birds can fly and birds can migrate. So out of the 311 species, a lot of them are migratory species. So that's why, of course, the degree of endemism is low. There are a few families, again, which are endemic to Madagascar. One of them is the ground rollers. This is the long-tailed ground roller. There are five species of this bird, of this family. Then you have kuas. Kuas are an endemic genus. They are basically cuckoos. They are nesting cuckoos. So they build their own nest. They lay eggs in their own nest. Uh, this is a very interesting bird. It's an endemic order. It's not just a family. It is the only bird that is found in its order. It's called a cuckoo roller. It is found across Madagascar and Comoros Islands. Apparently, one of the subspecies, some authorities consider it to be a different species because it's slightly smaller and stuff, but for now it's kind of considered the same. Oh, this one was a super surprise. So there was this place in Ranamafana where we had actually walked this clearing and we saw four species of lemurs right there. Both we saw two species of bamboo lemurs, one species of brown lemur, and I forget which was the fourth one. So we saw four species out there. It was like awesome. And it was like a forest canopy, but they were all there and they were doing their own stuff. It was superb. And we were just walking back, and this guy was sitting right there on the path, right next to the path, hardly how would I say? So this one, if you're familiar with photography, this was shot at 400 mm at full frame. There's no crop. I had to actually step back a little bit, prevent myself from falling down and shoot. It was like right there, right, and it was not disturbed. People were walking up and down, one eye open and just watching people. That's it. Amazing this fellow was. Madagascar scorpsaw. It used to be considered two species at some point of time, the wet zone and the dry zone, but they found that they're actually the same one. They just have different colorations. Paradise flycatcher was again very interesting for me because it looks like our paradise flycatcher to some extent. But this fellow was behaving like a fantail. There was a time to time it would just cock up its tail and do a little bit of fanning and stuff. So it was very interesting to watch the behavior of this bird. This was a amazing sight in terms of a birding. These are also called gray-headed lovebirds. They're found all over the dry zone, fairly common birds again. But it was just very interesting watching this interaction. We were just watching this, the male is on the right side with the gray head. We were watching him for a while, and then the female just came and sat, and they were, I think it was feeding the female and stuff. It was quite interesting to watch this interaction. The most common bird of the trip. Wherever we went, you would see a 4D. Like if you go to Madagascar and you don't see a 4D, I don't know. As in either you're not watching birds or Madagascar is in deep trouble. It's one of those things. And 4Ds are like everywhere. You see them in hotels, you see them in this one. This is probably one bird that you see all over the island. And it's very pretty. It's like, yeah, you can see the red. It's that bright as such. Speaking of birds, yeah, Madagascar also used to have this at some point of time, right? And from the most common bird to a bird that is no longer around, this is something called the elephant bird. The elephant birds, there was three species whose fossils have been found, and we kind of think that they went extinct around 1,000 years ago. One of them is thought to be the largest bird to have ever existed, towering at almost 3 meters in height and almost weighing about a ton. The egg is also supposed to have been the largest egg of any species kind of thing ever, and or at least of all the living kind of animals. There is again that convergent evolution, right? So we had moas in New Zealand. Moas were again these massive flightless birds that were found all across New Zealand at some point of time. And moas again went extinct as humans reached New Zealand. I think the last moa probably went extinct about 500 years ago or 600, 400 years ago, is what we kind of think. These again are believed to have gone extinct around the time when human activity started peaking. Humans are, it is thought that humans probably reached Madagascar about 2000 years ago. They have been there for a long time. The human history of Madagascar as such is again something that has gone through a lot of debate. It is now kind of agreed that most of Madagascars have a mix of origin. One origin is from Borneo and Indonesia, kind of a thing. So a large part of the eastern part of Madagascar, you would see people with a lot of features which are very similar to what you would see in Indonesia and stuff. And there's also been features that have come in because of migrations from continental Africa and stuff like that. So there is a mix of uh, uh, lineages of people who've come into Madagascar. But if you actually see the following slides, you would realize that after people have come, a lot of animals started going extinct, right? And this is a pattern that we see repeated across most remote landscapes or islands and stuff. Like there used to be lemurs as large as gorillas. Right? This was described from subfossil fragmentary jaws in 1909, known from a complete skull skeleton and six lower bones. It's estimated to have weighed around 160 kgs. This is probably the largest lemur that probably ever lived and presumed to have gone extinct around 2000 years ago. Postulated that again, habitat loss was probably a big reason. And it was around also the same time, it's kind of found from one site in central Madagascar. And the central highlands of Madagascar are areas where human habitation actually thrived. So when I was talking at the beginning of the presentation, also while we were driving through the central islands, we could hardly see any forested patches as such. And it is kind of postulated that humans arrived there, habitat started changing. Even if the animal was not hunted for food, it probably just ran out of space and went extinct. That's the theory that is there. And there's a lot more species that we know. In fact, Madagascar actually had three species of pygmy hippopotamus, which is believed to have been there till about 200-300 years ago or something. Giant lemurs, it was not the only one. There were about 17 species of giant lemurs and one species of crocodile as well that has gone extinct. The Nile crocodile is found in some of the areas around Madagascar now, but the native crocodile, the endemic crocodile, is no longer around. Many birds also, in addition to elephant birds, have disappeared. Something like the Alatra grebe, which was seen last around the mid 80s, was probably the last bird that disappeared. There was also the Madagascar pochard, which was thought to have gone extinct, but was again a small population was found in a very remote lake. There's a few birds again which are like critically endangered like that. And this is the stunning part about there. And I've just put lemurs and birds, right? Almost every group of animals has data which is very similar, like where you're looking at like, and lemurs is probably the worst that way, like looking at about one third of the species which are critically endangered, almost 40% of the species which are endangered, and there's hardly any which is least concern. There's like two birds with two species which are like least concern, right? And it's the highest proportion for any mammal group. In terms of endemic birds, they're doing slightly better, but you still have about 27 species out of 109 which are threatened with extinction, which is still a considerably big ratio. It's about one fourth of the endemic birds right there. So why is it getting there is for multiple reasons. I think one is, of course, less than 10% of original forests remain. It's estimated that in the last 50 years, almost 40% or 50% of the existing forests have disappeared. So what was 20% has now probably become 10%, or what was 15% has become 7.5% or whatever. A lot of human activity, of course, it's a fairly well populated country. There's a lot of habitat modification that has happened across Madagascar because it's been settled for over 2000 years. And a lot of slash and burn agriculture is still used to kind of clear hillsides, to clear forests and stuff. And apparently, I was reading about it and I was quite surprised that slash and burn is not just a practical thing, it is also a ritualistic thing. to kind of drive away spirits and all that stuff. So it's a mix of all that stuff. There's still hunting and logging, quite a poor enforcement of laws also, because the country is quite, it's quite a poor country overall, and it cannot afford all the systems that are probably there. Like for me, when I was kind of looking back and trying to find parallels, the biggest parallel was New Zealand, because one was of course elephant birds and moas, but then New Zealand has a very similar problem where animals are restricted to small pockets. You have, and a lot of the birds that are critically endangered and endangered have been taken away and put in a rodent-free island and stuff like that. A country like New Zealand can probably afford that, given that it's like a first world country. There's a lot of, systems that can be brought. Its political will is there. You can actually do things. Country like Madagascar, still very poor. Apparently, more than 80% or something. I hope I'm getting that number right, but a large population of the country earns less than $3 a day or $2 a day or something like that. It's a very, very poor country. And we actually saw that along the way in the southern part of the island when we were driving from Isalo to Ifati, the last stretch from the sandstones to the seas. Uh, so we had picked up a whole lot of mineral water along the way and stuff. So there were a lot of empty bottles which our guide kept saying, don't throw them out, just keep them in the car. And along the way, there were these kids who were sitting right next to the road, and he would actually pick up 10 bottles, 20 bottles, and throw them on the road. Apparently, the kids would pick up those bottles and they would use that to bottle, go down to the river, buy, get water, come back and sell it, or use that bottle for, bottling, I don't know, juices or liquor or whatever it is. So the bottles were actually very valuable to them, empty plastic bottles. It was that's how the country actually is. It's not the best of situations. And what we observed in terms of the good things that we observed, of course, was that, of course, there are examples like Ranamafana, which were created to protect the greater bamboo lemur and the golden bamboo lemur. Unfortunately, the greater bamboo lemur is almost gone from there, but there is still hope for the second one. You have a lot of community reserves and private reserves. We visited three of them, and all of them have these trained guides who actually take you around, show you stuff. And the surprising thing about guides, and I've not seen this anywhere in the world, the guides talk scientific names. That guy will show you a chameleon and talk and tell that this is a whatever, it's a first ever hostility. He won't tell this is a giant chameleon or whatever. They all speak Latin names. I've never seen this anywhere else, as in with that kind of confidence and that kind of accuracy. They just belt it out. It's amazing how much of uh, I don't know if it was an education thing or if they worked with researchers and they've come out of that, but it's phenomenal to watch that. And wherever we were driving, right, when we went to a park, when we went to a reserve, we would see a high density of animals. We would see a high diversity. Like I was saying, Ranamafana, we walked for half an hour. We saw 15 species of chameleon, 15 or 20 individuals. We saw about 5, 6 species of chameleons right there. It was like a gallery. You go outside and you kind of try to look for it, nothing. We went around the village, we went looking around, nothing at all. There is nothing we saw in the entire night. And on our long drives, and we had very long drives because the infrastructure is very poor, the roads are pathetic. Each of those places took us about a day to drive to. Along the way, if we saw an egret, we would celebrate. If we saw a myna, we would be like, oh, myna. And myna is an introduced bird. You would not see a single bird, forget about anything else, anywhere else apart from protected areas. It was it was a little better as we got from Ifati towards Tulyar, the latter part where we started seeing birds along the roads and stuff, at least 4Ds and a lot of cisticolas and things like that. But in general, it was like you don't see anything at all otherwise. The country is like literally empty. Ecotourism is something that seemed to hold a lot of value because wherever there was protected areas, there was tourism, there was a lot of employment. You could actually see that people were coming together to create infrastructure over there, to create guides, to kind of help out. There was a lot of things that kind of fell in place. But across the country, there's very little in terms of thing because your airlines are not very reliable. Apparently, we were very lucky. We kind of had flights on time and stuff, but apparently the airlines are not very reliable. The roads can get really bad, especially after monsoons. So it's still in a phase where, it has to kind of get developed to that kind of state. And there are some tough questions that we had to continuously keep asking ourselves in a country like that. Like in one of the places I remember, I'll just leave you with this last little story where we'd kind of gotten off the bus and, just to stretch our legs, we had been driving for almost, I think, 4 hours or something after lunch, and beautiful sunset happening. There was this nice viewpoint where everybody apparently stops. So our guide said, why don't we just get off and stretch our legs? We still have another 2 hours drive. We said, okay. And as we were kind of getting off the bus, there were these bunch of kids who were around, and we thought, like, usually people kind of, wherever you go, people would flock around asking for money and stuff like that. But then we noticed something. All these kids had sticks in their hand, and there was a chameleon on each stick. So there was about five, six kids, and each of them had like this small little, I think it's this Versifer major group. It's very beautiful looking chameleons. They're all like red and white, and they kind of have explosive colors. And what we kind of also realized later was probably they were holding two males together for the colors to kind of erupt and stuff. So they were all very colorful chameleons. All of them are holding, and they're like, give us certain amount of $1 or $2 or whatever for taking photographs of the chameleons or taking photographs with the chameleons or holding them or whatever stuff. And that was a question we kind of had to ask. And so we kind of completely discouraged that. We went, saw our stuff, got back into the bus. But then that question kind of lingered on, as in in a country this poor, as in if we go away, somebody would anyway come and have a look at those chameleons and photograph them or whatever stuff. But in a country this poor, does it make sense for us to give them money or so that they can go back and have dinner? Or does it make sense for us to kind of encourage them to leave it back? Because even if we tell them to leave it back where they found it, once we leave, they would go and pick them up again because it's everyday business for them. That was a big question, and we still didn't have any answer. We kind of course, didn't pay them anything. We didn't take a second look at that animal, although we were dying to look at them. But we just said, for whatever it is, let's not encourage this behavior. But that was a question that stayed on in our mind. Uh, So yeah, that was Madagascar. It's a mix of exhilaration as well as a lot of thoughtful experiences along the way. So I'll kind of open it up for questions.
Thank you, Sriram. I think we have a few questions on the chat box.
That. Sorry, it just ran on a little long, much longer than I expected actually.
No, very interesting because the kind of species that you covered and the photographs that you showed, it was like literally uh, taking us to Madagascar.
Thank you.
Very nice pictures.
Thanks, Sanjay.
Yeah. Chandrasekhar has a question. He says, one of my friends recently visited Madagascar and mentioned that many habitats there are facing serious threats due to deforestation and charcoal production, which are endangering the island's unique biodiversity. Is that true? He wants to know. What is your observation on that?
So we didn't see any direct this one of people cutting down trees or whatever, but apparently that is one of the big threats, especially around the rainforest and stuff, where people still use a lot of charcoal for their cooking and things like that. So I've heard that this is one of the biggest. It's one of the major reasons. Uh, the other reason, of course, also is a lot of these areas also get cleared up for mines and things like that. So it's a mix of how which is bigger is very tough to kind of say. But then, yeah, all these kind of contribute to deforestation and the stuff. Yeah, and yeah, all habitats are at risk. You see the protected area, you just move away from it, there's nothing. It's like 0 or 1. There is nothing in between.
Yeah, thanks, Rizwan. What is the best time for birding in Madagascar?
So the time we went was apparently not that great. The best time seems to be between July and October when the birds are breeding. So it's probably easier to find them because they would be in specific areas or specific territories and stuff. Uh, that's what I was kind of told, that between July and October is a good time for birding.
Okay, that's nice to hear. So when we can't bird here, we can go there. Uh, one more question. How long do lemurs live?
Tough to say. I haven't gone into that deeply, but I'm guessing there should be some studies on captive lemurs. Wild, I'm not really sure. Sorry.
Okay. Okay. There is one question from my side, Sriram. These lemurs, some of those, especially, um, I think it was the cat. I'm not sure. One of the lemurs, it looked just like our slender loris. Are they very similar to that? Some of them, at least some species, at least.
So technically, actually, I kind of forgot to mention the lorises are again the same superfamily as these. So lorises, tarsiers, and lemurs are all thought to have come from the same ancestor at some point. Uh, they have so some of these with those big eyes and stuff are nocturnal, and they behave like the mouse lemurs are exactly like that. They behave like thing. Their movement is very different though. They jump from tree to tree. Uh, these guys, lorises generally walk. They kind of grasp and they kind of walk. These guys jump. They jump from one tree to the other all the time. So that's a primary difference in terms of the locomotion as such. I'm
Okay.
not sure about the feeding habits also, though. I need to look that up. But
So,
yeah,
is there a lot of bamboo found in that area? I mean, yeah.
yes.
Okay. So, this 4D bird looks like a Indian house sparrow. Is it something related to common ancestors?
It's one of the sparrows or the finches. Let me just look that up anyway. While, yeah, I'll take up the next question and I'll probably look that up. Yeah. I think it's one of those, this one. It's been a while since I looked it up. Yeah.
You said this density of this animals is quite high in most of the reserves that you visited. Is it
Mhm.
because of loss of habitat? Do you think it's because of loss of habitat?
So in this one, in protected areas, the density is actually quite high. So wherever we go, we see like a lot of stuff. The only thing we were surprised at missing was bird song, and I would like to kind of go back in the right season to watch it. But otherwise, in terms of lemurs, in terms of reptiles and stuff, we actually saw quite a bit. We also saw a lot of frogs, which I haven't put into this thing. Uh, a lot of frogs, a lot of insects. You get these giraffe weevils and stuff. So a whole lot of that inside protected areas. Once you go out, it actually starts reducing. Outside, it's almost like negligible. So it's
And and
last.
and
Mhm.
and about the snakes, you also said that venomous snakes don't bite.
Mhm.
I mean, why do you say that it won't bite?
They have something called rear fanged snakes, like the perennial night snake that I showed you, the one that goes from gold to red. Apparently has this rear fang, so it has to really find a grip for it to be able to give you a bite with the fangs as such. So it's apparently venomous. Nobody knows the potency of the venom because it has never bitten anybody.
Okay.
So, and this is a snake that can actually, like, if it is this one, it can actually hood up and it shows it's like it behaves like a cobra in some way. Suddenly hoods up and tells you to back off. It is a very well sorted out snake that way. So
Very nice pictures of all those geckos and really colorful ones. Uh, I was also quite happy to know that we have something similar in Andaman as well, you know. And DGN Elsa from Canada, she says that the median life expectancy for a ring-tailed lemur is about 16 years up to 18 years in the wild and 30 plus in captivity. Wow, that's
wow,
a
quite a
lot
bit.
of uh, gap between the captive ones and the wild ones.
I would
Uh,
assume so, given the fact that they've had almost no predators, they would live long, is what. Yeah, that's interesting though. Yeah. Thanks.
can lemurs be kept as pets? Yeah, definitely. I think in India you can keep them as pets.
No,
Because no,
no.
no.
Mm,
Okay. Uh,
absolutely.
unless uh,
all gone by CITES.
Okay.
CITES won't allow you to.
Okay.
Go by Rana and Sugandhi's thing, saying no, they kind of mentioned no wildlife should be kept as a pet, loss aside. It's best of.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I also agree with that. But I was saying so because we see a lot of these uh, birds being kept as pets in India, which are not native. So,
The unfortunate thing is a lot of reptiles, much more than any of these things, are disappearing because of that. Sri Lanka has a big problem, at least from whatever reports keep coming out. India has a big problem. A lot of countries have problems with these smaller things. And a lot of them are disappearing because of the pet trade. Larger ones are probably easier to control to some extent. We've heard of tortoises, for example, star tortoises, massive trade and all going on. I think these are things which we need to kind of focus on in terms of controlling.
okay. Well, Chandni wants to know what's the main reason for golden bamboo lemur to decline. Do humans consume that species of bamboo where they are found? Also, considering that bamboo has a cyanide, I'm wondering what could be the cause for decline. I'm not sure
I
bamboo
would
has
not.
cyanide.
I wouldn't think consumption of bamboo for human food is probably a reason. I would think that it is also because of destruction of habitat. It's a fairly, and of course eating the lemur itself. Lemurs are eaten for food across Madagascar. In fact, there's actually this book by Gerald Durrell. The Durrell Foundation has been trying to kind of save some of these lemur species from extinction by taking them out and breeding them and trying to reintroduce and all that. But Durrell has this very nice book called The I and I. I can put it in the comments for everyone. So he talks about I think one of his last expeditions or whatever, where he goes to Madagascar to kind of to kind of find, I think, ayais and gentle lemurs and a few more. So he's, a lot of the lemurs that the gentle lemurs that they find are rescued from the pot. So somebody has found it in the forest, got it, and wants to cook it the next day. So his scouts have gone and found it and kind of got it. And I think gentle lemur, if I'm not wrong, is a kind of bamboo lemur as well. So I'm guessing that is one of the probably the big reasons for these things to decline. It's habitat loss because of other reasons, not because humans consume bamboo. Could be probably because of wanting to farm over there or whatever. And it's also consumption of the animals. She also has another question, I think. Do these species of lemurs that you found overlap in their habitats and food preference? Uh, Habitats, yes. Food preference probably might be different because I'm guessing different species of bamboos would be there in the forest, and a bigger animal versus a smaller animal would have different choice in terms of either the age of the bamboo or the species of bamboo and stuff like that. So I'm guessing they're all there because there is a good diversity of plants also for them to kind of feed on.
Okay. I think that's it. Do we have? I don't think there is any more question left in the chat box. Okay. Do lemurs have any unique behavior?
Each of them has their own behavior pattern. Like there are 110 species across different families and across different genera. So each of them, like a large number of them, for example, are diurnal. They are active in the day. But things like the mouse lemur and the sportive lemurs are active at night. There's also this dwarf lemur that we found at night. So there's a bunch of them that are active at night versus day. There are bamboo lemurs are apparently active early morning and late evening mostly. So again, there's that. The social behaviors again vary considerably in terms of foraging versus staying together kind of thing. So probably some of them go and forage on their own, but they form groups when they are roosting. Most of them, if yeah, most of them seem to be herbivorous. But then you have lemurs like the ii. The ii is probably the most weird lemur out of all of them, and for that reason, it's also kind of persecuted. The ii is an animal that feeds on. It's nocturnal. It feeds on beetle grubs. It's largely carnivorous. So yeah, each of them has the thing.
I have a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead.
It's Terrell Erickson from Hawaii. And I guess I didn't put it as a question, but I was thoughtful about your ecotourism, um, you know, event, I guess could say, that needs all of us to wonder about. And I am wondering what you all decided upon. And did you have more further conversation about ecotourism, being from an island and, having the most endangered, at least with the plants in North America? I'm wondering whether or not you discussed with the scientists about that anymore.
Specifically for Madagascar, not really, as in it was just a very empirical observation from an ecotourism perspective. It seemed that at least places where there was some amount of tourism activity, there was areas which were being covered. There was a little bit of surveillance and all that was happening, at least from the people who are walking in every day and stuff. So the standard benefits seem to be applying. Of course, as in I think more than tourism, I would say I would stress on the ecotourism fact, because like some places, for example, you have these very fancy resorts or whatever kind of that kind of come up in these places, which are as it is threatened ecosystems and stuff. And I don't know if how much that actually disrupts, or that probably would have a massive disrupting impact on the local wildlife and stuff as well. So I think just like with anything else, that balance has to be there in terms of how the tourism has to be there. But then again, yeah, I haven't had a discussion to your point with any experts on the matter as such.
Thank you, and wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Sriram. I think we are done with all the questions. Thank you all the participants for actively participating, and you know, it was really a virtual tour to Madagascar for all of us, Sriram. Um, yeah, uh, some amazing species that you have um, shown us all. Thank you so much. Um, uh, I would really recommend that, we should all try and visit Madagascar once, uh, at least to see the different species that are endemic to that particular region. So, thank you. And Sriram, with your permission, I would like to put up this particular recording on our website, so that those who couldn't make it today will be able to see it whenever they have time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for this opportunity. It
Thank
was
you.
really
Thank
good interacting with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thanks all for participating. Thank you.